Coming up in today's newscast, Russia gives Iran a new ultimatum in Syria. The I.D.F. reveals plans for a new underwater barrier around Gaza, and an Israeli parenting app saves a young Arizona teen from almost certain danger. After years of delay, the state has just granted humanitarian status and A5 visas to 300 Sudanese asylum seekers living in Israel. Still, though this is seen as a major win for this community, which has been petitioning for full refugee status for nearly a decade, tens of thousands of applicants still remain unanswered. Notably, humanitarian status is a step below actual refugee status, though the A5 visa does allow recipients to legally reside and work in the state of Israel. The Israeli government has long defended its refusal to grant refugee status to the nearly 40,000 asylum seekers living in the country. The vast majority, who are mostly Christians from Eritrea and Sudan, say that they fled war, genocide, and service in a slave army for a better life in Israel. The government originally intended to forcibly deport every last African man, woman, and child from the country. This plan came under intense scrutiny by the world's nations, especially since it would have deported families to a third unnamed African country with a history of human trafficking. Prime Minister Netanyahu reached a deal with the UN some months ago in which the UN would resettle half the migrants to safe Western countries in exchange for Israel absorbing the other half. But intense outrage from Netanyahu's right-wing coalition partners caused him to cancel this deal mere hours after praising it on television as the best possible one. Although the state still has yet to process thousands of requests from African asylum seekers, this is a victory for 300 of them, and one that gives them at least a temporary opportunity to thrive in the Jewish state. There have been a lot of question marks around Russia's involvement in Syria. Specifically, Israel has lobbied hard for Russia to keep Iran off of the southern border, away from Israel's front door. While Russia's foreign minister has now delivered a very public ultimatum, one that seems directed right at the Islamic Republic. Take a look.
Изначально договоренность о создании на юго-западе Сирии зоны деэскалации предполагала эвентуальный отвод всех несирийских сил из этой части Сирийской Арабской Республики. Итогом всей этой работы, которая должна продолжаться и продолжается, должна стать ситуация, когда на границе Сирии с Израилем с сирийской стороны будут стоять представители вооруженных сил Сирийской Арабской Республики.
A bit of background here. Ever since the Syrian army began to drive Islamic State fighters out of southern Syria, Iran has seized advantage and injected tens of thousands of proxy soldiers into the region. Iran has also financed and armed the militias of Lebanese terror group Hezbollah. Russia entered the Syrian conflict some years ago, and though Russia lately has given Israel relative free will to carry out military operations in Syria, many worry which side Russia would take in the event of an inevitable showdown with Iran. But this statement from Foreign Minister Lavrov is the first public sign that Russia would probably rein Iran in, possibly in order to avoid falling into being at odds with Israel. Now we'll just have to see if this ultimatum truly carries. Israeli construction teams have just begun a massive new undertaking, the building of an undersea barrier through Gaza-Israel waters. The project is designed to thwart Hamas terror and potential infiltration coming from the sea, and the army believes construction will be fully completed by the end of the year. This underwater barrier, the first of its kind anywhere in the world, will consist of 3 strategic layers designed to deter terrorists. The undersea section will be topped with thick, brutal stone, upon which will be a layer of barbed wire fence. This barrier itself will then be surrounded by another section of reinforced fence. The state greenlit this expensive undertaking following the 2014 Operation Protective Edge in Gaza. During that war, a Hamas naval vessel was able to enter Israeli waters. Hamas has continued to build its naval fleet and stage terror at sea ever since. But much like the IDF's underground barrier, which has detected and destroyed nearly a dozen terror tunnels in the past few months, this new barrier will be a cutting-edge layer of defense. The Defense Ministry aims to complete all construction within the year 2018. According to a troubling new poll conducted by the Union of Jewish Students in France, 53% of the 1,007 French respondents said that they agreed with the statement that Zionism is an international organization that seeks to influence the world and societies to the Jews' benefit. At least half also said that Zionism was a racist ideology. Well, here to help us unpackage some of these polls poll results is France expert and former Israeli Knesset member Daniel Bensimon. Thank you so much for coming back in today.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question is, first off, the younger generation, 18 to 34-year-olds, we found were largely more likely to be holding anti-Semitic attitudes versus the older generation. So what happened in the last 20 years to cause something like that?
Listen, the last 20 years were not good for French Jews, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, they are still staying there. Last year, which according to the poll was a bad year, only 1,000 Jews came to Israel. So it's bad, but not as bad as the poll tells you. So it's old anti-Semitism, what you see, but now we have a problem with the Muslim anti-Semitism. So we don't know exactly which is worse. The old one is fading away. The new one, the Muslim one, the radical Islam against the Jews, is stronger. So if you ask any French Jew, what is the biggest threat on your life here and on your future, he will tell you the Islamic anti-Semitism, the hatred for the Jews coming from Islam. So the poll is going too far, and I don't think it reflects exactly.
So you're saying it's being tainted kind of by extreme views that are recently
I'm so
occurring
sorry
in France.
to tell you that's the case. It's not as bad as it looks in the polls. Life in France is one.
That's good news.
No, because I know that so many people in Israel would like to see everything dark outside of Israel. But there are 600,000 Jews in France. The last immigrants from France, it was the last drop of French Jews, was, as I said, more than 1,000. It is bad, not as bad. It is anti-Semitic, but in not the old-fashioned way. It is a new anti-Semitism which has to do more with also Israeli actions. So you have to put it together. For many anti-Semitic and anti-Semites, Israel and the Jews are together. Sure. So if Israel does something bad in Gaza, so we go to Paris to our neighbor and we tell him, wow, why did you operate like this in Gaza? He'll tell you, it's not me, it's Israel. He said, but you are the same.
Well, so that brings me to kind of my next question, is that that for me is really a sign of ignorance about Israel and the Jewish people and the Jewish state, and that's also kind of reflected in this poll, which said, a majority of respondents didn't even know that Israel was created in 1948. Nearly a quarter of them said it was created after 1980 even. So do you think that that's driving a lot of this?
As when you talk to French students, non-Jewish, they have a sense that Israel is a superpower. It has, they see Israel on the news on a daily basis. They use weapons. They have talk to American president whenever they want. They do this and that, and they get all kind of ideas from French papers about the richness of the Jews. So when you put a strong army and rich Jews and Israel together, you get a sense that they, like in the poll, they run the world, which is not the case. But for young people, it's so easy to be superficial and to say that Israel is as bad as they say, or Israel runs the world. It's not this case. Israel and France are doing very well in terms of relations. The problem is, for many Jews, the future of the Jews in France. According to the poll, and to many polls, the future is questionable. Maybe in 50 years, Jews will not be able to live in France, but for the time being, it's okay.
All right, well, it's good to hear that at least there's some positive news to come out of this poll.
That's right.
Daniel Bensimon, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
All right, now it looks like Israel's Attorney General is preparing to indict Sarah Netanyahu, wife of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, with criminal charges. Sarah is accused of abusing state funds for her own personal use, and in the event this does go to court, that means that the charges would likely be fraud and breach of trust. This is a scandal that's been brewing for quite some time now. From September of 2010 until at least March of 2013, Sarah Netanyahu allegedly worked with a senior member of the Prime Minister's Jerusalem residence to mislead authorities into believing the estate had no chef employed in the premises. Under this apparent guise, Sarah Netanyahu then allegedly authorized meals for the Netanyahu residence, amounting to at least 359,000 shekels of taxpayer money. At this time, there is a state witness, the Prime Minister's residence former caretaker, who is said to have corroborated the police's evidence. Israel's Attorney General, Avichai Mandelblit, has ordered Netanyahu's lawyer to reach a settlement in the coming days or else be prepared to see this case in court. Netanyahu's legal team allegedly reached a compromise of a plea bargain in which Netanyahu would reimburse the state for at least part of the money, as well as confess to a degree of the charges. Sarah Netanyahu reportedly refused this idea herself, however. Her legal team has argued that these charges cannot be mounted because Sarah Netanyahu is not, in fact, a public servant. In possibly related developments, a member of Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party is now proposing new restrictions on the media to block reports on public figures under investigation. Here with the details is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith. Brett, thank you for joining us.
Sure.
So what's the proposal here?
Okay, so this comes from MK Miki Zohar, and Zohar's proposal would require journalists, like me and you, for example, to obtain special permits to publish any new reports on new police investigations that open against public officials. Now, Zohar is one of several members of the Likud who has often claimed that, the police unjustly targets politicians as a kind of revenge, they say. Others, of course, say that this whole concept is kind of just a dangerous threat, we can say, to freedom of speech and to the freedom of the press.
Well, yeah, this reminds me of the so-called recommendations law, which the Knesset passed last year, and that law makes it illegal for police to publicly say whether they've recommended charges on public officials or not. There's also severe punishments on people who leak information to the press.
Yeah, there's actually been quite a few proposals over the years along these lines. Last year the Likud pitched a bill, you may recall, called the French law, and that would have given a serving prime minister total immunity from corruption investigations like these altogether. Ironically, of course, that law's biggest supporter in the Likud party was former coalition chairman David Bitan, who has since stepped down from his post amidst police investigations into alleged, bribery, money laundering, and tax evasion.
All right, well, let's remember here, these are all allegations playing out in the public eye.
Of course.
Before any actual charges have been filed, and if any actual charges get filed in the end. So Prime Minister Netanyahu, who himself does face a number of corruption investigations, says that most probes do not end up with indictments. So the question is, does the country need a law to maintain damage control in a situation where there was no wrongdoing in the first place?
Yeah, the other question is, what if there was wrongdoing? Sure, look, you're right. At the end of the day, all of this will have to play out in court, even if it ever actually gets that far. And every citizen, of course, has their right to due process. But does the public also have the right to know if their elected officials are committing wrongdoing? And it's not just civil wrongdoing we're talking about, by the way. We're talking about potentially, criminal acts at the highest levels of power here. A lot of people argue that the debate here doesn't even seem to be about, holding politicians to a higher moral or even equivalent legal standards. To them, it feels more about, shielding them and their reputations, whether or not yes or no crime was indeed committed.
All right, well, this is definitely a tough one. On one hand, both the media and the police need to have freedom to be impartial. On the other hand, with that power comes immense responsibility, of course.
Sure.
Obviously, this is a much bigger debate than we have time for today. So anyways, thank you very much for joining us, Brett.
Of course.
All right, now the startup scene here in Tel Aviv is buzzing as Tel Aviv University's annual innovation conference is back. The three-day event will be attended by both entrepreneurs, investors, and experts, and it even sports a $150,000 grand prize. Here to tell us more is Feiruz Rizkala, Director of the Innovations Department at the Student Union of Tel Aviv University. I'm so sorry for butchering that. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being here. All right, so first of all, tell us a little bit about the details of this conference.
So it's a three-day conference that's starting on the 16th of June till the 18th of June. It will open with the semifinals of the biggest startup competition held today in universities, and there will be 70 startups competing in 10 different categories, 7 startups in each category. They will be competing for, as you said, $150,000 prize, main prize, and many different other prizes. And it's going to be funded by the Tau Ventures, which is Tel Aviv University's venture capital that invests initial seed, pre-seed in early stage startups, both held by students and alumni in Tel Aviv University. And the event itself, it's going to have many different panels and lectures and a lot of events, just like Rothschild TED Talk, where professionals in these different fields are going to give lectures on many different subjects, such as media, blockchain, IoT, and many different others.
All the new things that are popping up, on the market now.
Exactly. Everything that's hot and new today in the market. And the whole event, the main reason for holding this event is to give the students opportunity to get to know what's out there and to just enable these meetings between startups, big corporates, students, alumni, and everybody that is interested in entrepreneurship.
To make it just, even if you don't win that $150,000 cash prize, you're still leaving with something. You're still making a connection.
You're leaving with a lot of
something.
networking, a lot of new ideas to get to know what new technologies are being developed out there today.
Yeah, all right. Well, so what are you most excited for this year?
I'm mostly excited about the opportunities that can rise up from such event when you put together students, alumni, professionals in their different fields, and you put all of this together and you enable it to happen. Connections and innovations and new things just rise up the.
The cream rises to the top.
Exactly.
So, and I understand that you're actually also participating to a degree this year. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll be participating. I'll be available in all the events to see what's out there, and as the director of innovation department, just to learn and try to understand what are the needs of the students of today, to try and give the academia an opportunity or a better opportunity to serve students justice and give them exactly what they need in the innovation department that we're working on.
All right. Well, I mean, it sounds like an incredible event, and I hope that everybody who has a chance to register does. If you want to register, if you're interested, go to tau-innovations.com. Feiruz, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now, Will, if you felt the earth itself quiver last night around 10 p.m., no, it was not an earthquake. It was probably the tens of thousands of Israeli fans screaming their hearts out during a concert of their one and only hero, the one, the only, Enrique Iglesias. The pop superstar performed a killer show for over 40,000 raving fans last night in Tel Aviv's Hayalon Park. The crowd danced and sang along to the performance, which of course pulled out all the stops. Iglesias heated up the night with a pyrotechnic show, gyrated along to laser lights, and topped it off with a fireworks finale. He even pulled a 15-year-old fan up on stage with him to help perform the singer's most famous song. Yes, he can certainly be your hero, baby. But a lot of spectators weren't even there for the music. Other than a few pop hits, Iglesias' set list included a lot of his lesser-known songs. But the spectacle itself was something to behold, especially when the night concluded with a Spanish-Israeli flag. Needless to say, Israelis are certainly addicted to this dirty dancing. You may not think it, but the Cannes Film Festival has much more to offer than just an array of different international films. The red carpet events have turned into a fashion runway, and in the last couple of years, there have even been some, let's say, questionable fashion choices being made. TV's Emmanuel Kadosh has the details. Memo?
Well, you said it pretty accurately. Yeah. The Cannes Film Festival has kind of, obviously, people go and attend and they pay attention to this film festival because of the films, the stars, everything that has to do with it, the directors, actors. But the red carpet has taken over. The fashion scene is a really big deal. And in the last few years, we have seen some things that have stood out, let's just say it that way. Israel Minister of Culture and Sports, Miri Regev, last year wore a dress that had a 360-degree view of Jerusalem skyline, which was you could say controversial at the time. People had a lot to say about it. She actually now is auctioning off the dress on a website where she is donating all the profits to help develop Jerusalem and certain things that are happening in Jerusalem. Yes, and now this year, a European actress by the name Monica Eckert also wore something a little controversial, you could say. She wore the Israeli flag on the top half, and the bottom half is more, you can say, houses under construction. Nobody really knows specifically what it is. So from what we understand, there has been no connection to the Vietnamese designer who created the dress. She hasn't come out saying anything really specific about why she wore the dress herself. People are really having a lot to say about this. They're saying it's a slap in the face for the BDS movement, kind of saying, we're here, this is Israel. And I don't know, I have a little bit, I'm kind of held back about this dress.
Yeah, I don't know anything about fashion. For those sorts of things, I typically defer to you.
Right.
I mean, I can understand that it would be a little in your face for a lot of people. It's provocative.
Yes, I think it's a very in my opinion, again, just my opinion, a little inappropriate for the time specifically. It's very, sensitive time period right now is, with everything going on. And her to be strutting the Israeli flag on her chest with the Star of David, in my opinion, just kind of stands out, like you said, a slap in the face. What they are saying is a slap in the face to the BDS movement, which is fine. I'm a Zionist. I love Israel. I love my country. I love people that support it. I don't think this is the right way to support it on the red carpet with the Israeli flag.
Well, I think a lot of the controversy, rather, or the criticisms that we've been hearing comes mostly not from her statement, but the placement of it.
Exactly.
The timing of the
which is exactly what I'm saying. I think that it's fine to stand behind Israel and slap BDS in the face and do whatever it is that you're trying to do, but in a different, maybe calmer way.
What about fashion-wise? How would you kind
absolutely
of?
Not.
Absolutely.
Just absolutely not.
Just not.
Yeah.
That's
just not.
That's a nice short answer.
Yes, that's all I have to say about it. I think that she could have done better. There's definitely different ways of doing it. And Linda Carter, the former Wonder Woman, had the Star of David, a pin in her hair at the Oscars, which I think was a little bit,
that's pretty
calmer.
low-key.
Yes, exactly, definitely.
All right, well, Emmanuel Kadosh, thank you very much for coming back in.
Thank you.
All right. Now, the parents of an Arizona teenager were able to rescue their son from almost certain danger recently. They discovered that their 13-year-old teen was in a sexual relationship with his 27-year-old teacher. But almost as shocking as that news is how they actually found out about it. An Israeli app installed on their son's phone told them about the relationship after detecting illicit content being sent to him on his smartphone. This app, which is called Sentry, is very different from a lot of other parent control applications out there. Usually kids can cheat applications like Bark and Uno by changing their passwords or even creating false logins. Well, the Israeli-based makers of Sentry knew that kids these days were very smart, which is why they created a new system that actually worked in Android systems without requiring the user to input their password. The algorithms run in the background of message-delivering apps like WhatsApp and reviews images for nudity and texts for suggestive content. If the app finds anything suspicious, it alerts parents' phones about the problem and relays them the content. The Ra'anana-based makers of Sentry are, of course, extremely aware of the dangers of circulating material that might potentially include child nudity, which is why the app automatically blurs out identities and images before they get forwarded to parents. The rest, of course, is left to the parents. But if the Arizona teen's story is any indicator, this app could potentially be a life-saving tool for parents in the digital age. In just a few short weeks, the world will finally get its first ever look at an incredible archaeological find made right here in Israel. The Israel Antiquities Authority is pleased to announce that clay seals, which are believed to have been used by both Isaiah the prophet and King Hezekiah, will go on display beginning June 10th. Now, the obvious question first, where exactly is the exhibit? Well, this is actually a joint effort by American and Israeli foundations. For that reason, the clay seals will be released to the public simultaneously in twin exhibits in both Jerusalem and Oklahoma. Museum goers in Oklahoma will get to see the seals in the flesh. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, the archaeologist who found the seals will deliver a keynote speech while the seals are broadcast behind him with a live stream from the U.S. In mid-August, the relics themselves will then return to Israel, where they'll probably find a permanent home in an Israeli museum shortly thereafter. These incredible artifacts, which are over 2,000 years old, were discovered during a dig last February at the foot of Jerusalem's Temple Mount. And markings on the surface, though incomplete, have led historians to believe that they came from the 8th century BCE. At that time, King Hezekiah ruled over the kingdom of Judah, advised by none other than the biblical prophet Isaiah. For many Americans, this will be their first chance to see symbols from this era up close and personal. The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by IDC Summer Ulpan, open to everyone. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Whether it's your kids, your property, or just your sanity, everyone has something they want to protect. So today's word is le'agen, meaning to protect. Now, Israel is no stranger to le'agen, or to protect. In the news, we're often talking about the Tzava Haganah Le'Israel, or the Israeli Defense Forces. When you look at the Israeli flag, you see the Magen David, or the Shield of David, aka the Jewish Star. And now that summer's here, you have to make sure that you wear your crème Haganah, or suntan lotion, to protect yourself from UV light. Whatever the case, just remember not to go overboard with the Haganah or defense, or you might just never leave the house. And with that, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be partly cloudy with a chance of rain and a low of about 70 or 21 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect more of the same with little to no change in temperatures and a high of around 81 or 27 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.56 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.